Merry Christmas, YouTube. Here at Moralis, we've had a great year, and the response to our YouTube content has been amazing. That's why we decided to give our viewers and the Web3 community a little Christmas gift in the form of a Web3 tutorial where we give CryptoPunks Santa hats programmatically, all powered by Moralis. Of course, the principles in this video can be used for any other NFT collection as well. You'll read the NFT's metadata, the status of the smart contract the NFT collection resides on, and using that, any token ID from the collection, you can always render a Santa hat perfectly for that NFT. So here we see this NFT, even if we have a NFT with different dimensions, for example, a CryptoPunk female, and with a different background, see we have a red background here and a female, the Santa hat is perfectly on there. Let's try one more example over here. For example, 550. We should get the CryptoPunks with the Santa hat perfectly placed on their head. If this sounds interesting to you, stay stuck in and I'll show you how to build this. And if you're thinking of a last minute Christmas gift for us here at Moralis, it'd be amazing to see our channel hit 100,000 subscribers by the end of the year. The subscribe button is just down there. Please hit it and have a Merry Christmas. All right, getting started here. I have Visual Studio Code open, and I have this started repository called CryptoPunks open. Within it, we have a backend folder where we have an index.js file, which has a very simple Express server boilerplate for us, just till we get off to a flying start. We have one endpoint called getpunks, and we haven't even set up the Moralis functionality yet because we'll do that all in this tutorial. But we'll get to the backend side a bit later in this tutorial. Let's close this and check out this front end folder where we have a very simple React app, and in the source folder you see over here we have all the image assets we'll take advantage of, and then we have this app.js file, which is very simple. We just have that Christmas background and some of the logo assets for the left top corner and right top corner. And we're also taking advantage of a app.css file, which will be pre-built for you in the starter repository, so we don't have to focus too much on the styling. We can focus more on getting the punks, giving them Santa hats, and analyzing the features of the NFTs so we can give them the correct Santa hat. All right, so let's close out app.css, jump into app.js, and let's check out what we're working with. So open up your terminal, make sure you install all the dependencies in this front end folder. So go ahead and run a cd front end. And then what you can do is go ahead and run npm i, or if you use yarn, you can use yarn as well, but npm i will install all the dependencies of the front-end project, and then we can go ahead and just run npm run start. And I've set it up so that it should start running on port 3001. It opens up for us, and look at this. We have a very cool starter app over here. We have a nice background image. We have our Punkmas logo in the top left corner and our Powered by Moralis logo in the bottom left corner. So this is a very good starting point. So let's go ahead and start creating that canvas where we have the CryptoPunk next. So jumping to Visual Studio Code, we can close down our terminal, and in the source folder, we can create a new file called canvas.js. So this is what we're going to draw our CryptoPunk with its Santa hat on. Make sure it's a capital letter C, and then just create a React functional component. I have a little shortcut, RFCE, and now we have our canvas component in which we can start creating our CryptoPunks with Santa hats. In this component, let's kick things off by bringing in from React, use ref and use effect. So use ref will create a reference for our canvas component, and use effect will just make sure that we run the canvas every time this component loads. So starting off with that use reference, let's create that canvas reference. Canvas ref will be equal to a use ref, and it'll be initialized to null. And then we can create our use effect. Use effect, make that arrow function over in here, and make sure that at the start we'll run it every time we reload the app, like so. Later on, when we make calls to the Moralis endpoints, we'll make sure that we run this canvas every time we get a new punk from our Moralis endpoint. But for now, we'll just make sure that we generate the CryptoPunk on load of this component. So in here, let's go ahead and create our canvas, which will be equal to canvasref.current. So it'll be null. Then next we'll have to provide context for our canvas. Will it be 3D or 2D? Because we're working with CryptoPunks, it'll be just a 2D canvas. And then we're going to go ahead and create our image. So we'll just call it, for example, punk will be equal to a new image. Now we have to provide the image with the source and alt properties. And to be able to do this, we need the image sources. So for now, because we have a male punk over here in this repository, and we have a lady punk as well, let's go ahead and add those and see how it looks on our web page. So go over here at the top and make sure you import the punks like so. So the male will reference to the male punk image PNG, and the lady will reference to the lady punk PNG. For now, we'll just use the male. So we can say punk.source would be equal to male. And we have to give the alt property. We can just say, for example, current punk. Like so, just make sure to have the alt typed correctly. Now, because it might take a while for the punk to load, especially when we're actually getting the actual image URL and not just loading it from our directory, let's make sure that on load of the punk will create an asynchronous function like so, and then draw this punk on our canvas like so. So we're waiting this image we've just imported to be drawn on our canvas, and then we should be ready for our first iteration. So now on our canvas, we should just have the punk we've loaded from our directory itself. We just have to make sure we return the canvas tag over in this canvas functional component. And as the reference, we use the canvas ref we created over here. We set a width of 500 and height of 500. So we always get a constant size for our CryptoPunks. Let's go ahead and save that. And now as we have this canvas component, let's go ahead and open app.js and import it in over here like so. So now we have our canvas component and we can actually paste it in inside our div. Let's paste it over here. So it'll be the canvas. And because we don't have any props yet, it's just the canvas component like so. We save this and we can go check out our app. Look at this. Now we have our CryptoPunk being generated over here into our app. We can go ahead and change it to the lady if we'd like to. Jumping back into Visual Studio Code, if we jump into the canvas component, and rather than using the male image as the source, if we change it to the lady like so, jump back into Google Chrome, now we have the lady punk. Next step is adding that Santa hat for these punks. Let's go check out how we do that. So jumping back into Visual Studio Code, checking out our repository of images, we have a lady hat, we have different colored hats, for example, the purple hat, the blue hat. For now, we'll just focus on the blue hats. At the end of the video, we'll check how we can actually get the color of the CryptoPunks background and by that use the correct image. But for now, it just suffices to use the lady hat and the same thing for the male hat over here, but they are different sizes because if we open up a male punk, for example, over here, and on the other side, we open the lady punk, you can see that their dimensions are different. Male punks are a bit taller and a bit wider, and the lady punks are a bit narrower and a bit shorter. So that's why we have two different hats. We have the lady hat that will be used to be placed on top of the lady punks. And then for the male punks, we have the male punk hat over here, which is slightly above and slightly wider, but they are both 500 pixels wide. So they should fit perfectly if we just know if it's a lady punk or a male punk. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's close these. Jump back into the canvas component, make sure we import the hats over in here. So we have the male hat and the lady hat. And now, as we've already drawn the image of the punk, after this, we can create a new image for the hat. So let's just do it like so. So const hat equals new image. And same thing, we'll give it a source property and an alt property like so. And notice as the source, we use the lady hat because we are drawing a lady CryptoPunk. And then the same thing on hat load, we can go ahead and create a asynchronous function, which awaits to draw this hat image on our canvas reference like so. And notice that we set the width to 500 pixels, and for the lady hat, the height will be 234 pixels to fit perfectly. If we save this, we can go check this out. We should now have a lady punk with a Santa hat. How sweet is that? But let's check what this looks like for a male CryptoPunk. So opening up Visual Studio Code, jumping and changing the punk source to male, saving that, jumping into Google Chrome. Look at this. The Santa hat is kind of narrow and it's almost on the eyes of the Santa hat. So what we'll have to do is create a conditional to check whether we have a male punk or a lady punk and conditionally render the correct hat. So jumping into Visual Studio Code, let's go over here and create a conditional. If punk.source is equal to lady, we'll do what we just did over here. Within this conditional, let's just style this nicely, Shift Option F. And otherwise, else will do the same thing. So copy all of this, but for a male punk hat. So paste that in here. Make sure as the hat source, we use male hat. And the male hat dimensions will be 209 pixels for the height, like so. So we can change this to male like so. And now we should be working very nicely. Let's save this, see what happens on Google Chrome. Now we have the male hat because it recognizes that the canvas's image source was male. But now if we change it to lady, let's go ahead and change this punk source to lady, like so. Jump back into Google Chrome. Now it automatically uses our Lady Santa hat. And now that is a simple way from your local directory to get a CryptoPunk and give it a hat on a web page in a React app. But now let's go ahead and use Moralis to make a call to the NFT endpoint to get actual image metadata and image URL so we can define in our app a specific input for a token ID and get that specific NFT rendered on our page. So jumping back into Visual Studio Code, what we're going to do is jump into the app.js component where we can create our input fields. But for that, we'll need state variables. So import useEffect and useState from React. And then let's go ahead and create a few state variables. We'll create one for our punk ID, so the request that we want to send to Moralis, so we can store that token ID in a state variable. And then we'll create another variable where we store the response sent from Moralis. Over in here, we can just paste these. So we have a punk ID variable, which initially we just set it to token ID 1. And then the punk details is an empty object to start off with. But as we get our response from Moralis, we'll populate this punk details with the correct token ID and the gender of the punk. So now, to be able to populate this punk ID, we'll have to have an input field and a button that will change the punk ID. So let's go ahead and under our canvas, create that input field and button like so. So now we have an input field, which is a type of number. Its max value is 9,999. Min value is 1. Its value is the punk ID state variable. And on change, it calls this change ID function, which we have to create. And then we have a button, which on click fires up a getPunk function, which we have to create as well to make that request to Moralis. So what we'll do now is create that change ID function and the getPunk function. So scrolling up all the way to the top, underneath our state variables, let's first create that function that just changes our punk ID. Very simple function here, change ID, which takes whatever the change event in the input field was, takes the target value and sets the punk ID to that value. And now for the getPunk function, that will be an asynchronous function, async function, getPunk, which will now make a call to our backend and return us the punk details. So we have to make sure that our backend is working for this getPunk function to work. So we can just create this first and then go worry about our backend later. To make a request to our backend, we'll have to import Axios to make that request. So we're importing Axios, and then let's give a const response. So whatever our response will be, we'll await Axios to fetch from our backend. I'll just paste it in over here. So we're going to use Axios to get from localhost 3000, which was where we'll have our backend running, the getPunk endpoint. And as parameters, we'll send an object with an ID key, which is in string format, the punk ID we set in our app itself. So let's go ahead and after we get this response, set the punk details to whatever the response's data is, response.data. So now we just have to make sure that in our backend, we structure our response whenever this endpoint is called to be suitable for our front end. So for now, let's go ahead and save this. Let me just show you what the input field looks like. So now you have this input field and we can change the input field anywhere between 1 and 9999. Like so, but it doesn't get anything yet because the getPunk function isn't functional yet. Let's jump into Visual Studio Code. And now let's go ahead and create this backend that's running on localhost 3000. Just to keep things clear and simple, let's just close all the tabs we have open right now. Close this source folder, close this front end folder, and jump into this backend index.js file where we have our simple Express server, which is our backend. And we've set it to run on localhost port 3000 after we run this script. But as we're going to change this, let's open up our terminal. We have some warnings for our front end file because it's not ready yet, but you don't have to worry about these. And we can go ahead and open up another terminal window. Over here, we should be in the CryptoPunk parent repository, so we can cd into the backend folder. And again, all the dependencies should be ready to install by just running npm i. All right, so now our backend file has node modules installed, so we can go ahead and start it by running npm run start, which is a script that it has to run it using nodemon, so we don't have to restart it all over again as we're making changes. So now our backend folder is running on port 3000. We can close this and start making changes. So as we have this endpoint called getPunk, which we're calling from our front end, now currently we're only sending a response of punk, your punk string back to the front end. But what we want to do here is actually make a request to the Moralis endpoints. And as you see here, when this server was started over here, it was only started after we've initialized Moralis with our API key over here. So you have to have a .env folder where you have your Moralis API key stored in the Moralis_key variable. You can get your Moralis API key by jumping over to Google Chrome, coming to the Moralis.io website, logging in or starting an account for free. You'll then arrive at your Moralis admin dashboard. If you're new here, you can go ahead and check out our video or just start checking out our API reference or tutorials. But if you just want your API key, jump into the second tab over here in the sidebar and you have your API key, which you can copy and then make sure you paste it in your .env file. And now after this, we're ready to start using Moralis functionality. And for this, all we have to do is make one call to get the metadata for a token ID in a specific NFT collection, which is in our case, the CryptoPunks NFT collection. How we do this is first, we'll get the request that was sent by our front end. So we store it in the query, in this query object, and in our front end, we sent an ID. So we'll use that ID in the parameters for our Moralis API call. And for our Moralis API call, we'll store the response in this response variable here in our backend. And let me just paste it in over here, like so. We're gonna get from the Moralis EVM API NFT method, the get NFT metadata endpoint. And all it takes as required parameters is the address we're looking at, which is the CryptoPunks address. You could use any other NFT collection address here if you wanted to. And then the token ID, which we are getting from our front end request, the query.id. And of course, we have to wait for this response. Otherwise, we just jump straight away and send our response back to our front end. And feel free to check out the Moralis documentation for all the other endpoints that Moralis provides. So that is very simple on how you get the response. And now we can go ahead and check out how this response looks like. Let's go ahead and create a const metadata, which will be equal to the response in raw format, and it'll have a metadata key. And as it'll be in stringified format, let's just parse this in JSON dot parse like so. And now let's go ahead and console.log this metadata variable we just created like so. For now, what we can do is we can just respond to the front end with the punk, your punk string, and we can test this out. So if we go ahead and save this, what we'll do is close this so we have a bit more real estate, open up our terminal. So now in our console, we should get the metadata for whatever token ID the front end sends us. And as our front end is running, we can open that up side by side like so. And now let's create this request using the get Santa button to token ID 731. Let's get the Santa. And look at this, we get the response from Moralis almost instantaneously. The metadata over here, we have the image key, which has the image of the NFT. We have the name of the NFT, which is CryptoPunk 731. And it also has the attributes and description, which has the male tag. So now let's try an NFT I know for sure is a female. So I think 241 is one. Over here, get the Santa. And look at this. We get the image ID for this CryptoPunk, its attributes, and the description, which is female. We can even check it out. So if we take this image URL, copy this, and paste it over here into our navigation bar, look at this. We get the wild blonde NFT 241, and it is clearly a female. And we have the image URL. How sweet is that? So now what we'll do is let's close this and open up our terminal wide screen again. Rather than sending as a response punk your punk to our front end, what we'll do is we'll send the image and the gender of the punk back over to the front end over here. So like so, the image will be from the metadata variable, the image key, and the gender will be from the metadata variable, the description key, as if we want to check again, the image over here in the image key, and the gender over here in the description key. So like so, we're almost ready to go. Let's save this. This will work for now. On our backend side, let's go ahead and open up our front end side again. So open up your file directory. We can close down our index.js file for now. Close down the backend, jump into the front end source app.js. And over here, we're setting the punk details to response.data, but let's also go ahead and console.log the response.data like so, and see if we're actually getting the response of the image URL and the gender of the NFT back to us. Let's save this, close this for a while, and now jump back into Google Chrome, open this full screen, We have our React app running over here. Let's open up the console like so. So now if we create this request by pressing the Get Santa button, we should get the image URL and the gender for token ID 1, which looks like a male. Let's get Santa. And rather instantaneously in our console, we log gender male and the image URL for this CryptoPunk. We can try it for a different token ID. Let's say, for example, 7814, get Santa. And look at this. Now we get the image URL for CryptoPunk 7814 and the gender of them, which is female. How sweet is that? What this means now is we don't have to pre-render this CryptoPunk we have in our local directory. We can use this image URL that we got from our Moralis API call that was running on our backend to render the actual image of the token ID we've selected. So let's implement that next. Let's close down our console, jump into Visual Studio Code. And here in our app.js file, let's first make sure that on load of this component, we'll use the use effect to make our first call to our backend, which is the getPunk function, getPunk, like so, and otherwise we'll make the call when we press the button. But now also for our canvas component over here, let's pass in a prop with the punk details, like so, punk details. So now anytime we run the getPunk function, so on load of the app, and when we press the button, the set punk details will change the punk details variable. And so our canvas will have a new punk details. So we save that. Let's jump back into our canvas component over here, open this up, and we can change our use effect to run every time the punk details change. Punk details. But we have to make sure that we pass it into the canvas component over here in the object, punk details, like so. And we have to make a few changes. Now, rather than using as the source the lady punk that we brought in from our local directory, let's use from the punk details object the image key, like so. And then for our conditional, we're not checking if the source of the punk is our locally stored image. We're going to check from the punk details we got from our backend and Moralis the gender of the CryptoPunk, and if it's not equal to a male punk, we'll run the lady code like so. But if it is equal to male, we'll run the male hat Santa code. So now it should be working. Let's save this. Make sure that our app.js still looks correct. The use effect should only run on mount like so. So change that in the use effect. And now save that. We can open up Google Chrome. And look at that, we have punk1 over here, which is a male, and a little smirk over here. If we go ahead and change this, say to punk35, get Santa, and look at this, it changes the punk. Let's go for 241, which we knew was a woman, get Santa, has the crazy hair, and look at that, we get the lady punk hat for this one. How sweet is that? And we're getting the object every time. So this time we got the lady punk. This time over here, we got CryptoPunk35, which is a male. This time, on the first run, we got CryptoPunk 001. We can try this with any other code for valid CryptoPunk 7815. Look at this. We get sweet, cool sunglasses with a Santa hat. How sweet is that? So now everything is working except for one factor. So let's open up Larva Labs page and see that sometimes these CryptoPunks have a different color background. Rightio, so here I'm on the Larva Labs page on the CryptoPunks page, and if we scroll down, we have a lot of information about CryptoPunks, but here we have something very interesting. Punks with a blue background are not for sale and have no current bids. So that is how they set the background of the different CryptoPunks. Now here, for punks with a red background, they are available for sale by their owner. So the owner is actually put their punk for sale, and finally, you can bid on CryptoPunks, and if a punk has a valid bid set on the smart contract, they will have a purple background. So if we scroll a bit down over here, we see that, for example, these largest sales, none of these are for sale or have any bids, but here are a few with recent transactions. And if we scroll even further, we have these for sale and the bids. So we can actually check some of these out. Let's go ahead and check, for example, this one out. CryptoPunk 1527 should be up for sale according to this chart. And if we go to our app, search for 1527 and get the Santa, look at that, it is for sale. The background for the original CryptoPunk is the red color background. We are using the correct Santa hat, the lady hat for this lady, but because we have the blue background for the Santa Claus hat, it doesn't look nice. The same thing we can check out for a CryptoPunk with a pink background. Let's check, for example, this one with a nice hat. Let's change this to a Santa hat. So 5550. Over in here, change this to 550, like so. Get this Santa. And look at this. We get the purple background, but we get the correct hat. One thing I actually noticed that sometimes the description type for the punks might not be male, but it'll have the male structure, for example, for aliens and apes. So we have to change that. Jumping back into Visual Studio Code, our canvas.js, let's make sure we change this line over here at 19 to equals to female. Like so, and now everything should still work similarly. Just a nice little note that if you use aliens, so if you jump back to Google Chrome, check out an alien NFT. For example, this one over here, 3443. Change that to over here, 3443. Get the Santa. Now it works perfectly for aliens as well, as the aliens have the male structure. Just a little note for you. But now let's focus on this coloring of the background. How do we get the color? Because the metadata for our NFTs did not have color of the background of the image. If we jump into Visual Studio Code, here we have the backend terminal running. You see clearly that we only get the image, the name, the attributes, and the description. So what we'll have to do is we'll have to check out the smart contract for CryptoPunks, check out if this CryptoPunk ID has been put for sale, and then if it hasn't, we'll also have to check if it has any active bids. And based on that information, we can send to the front end whether the background color should be blue, red, or purple. So let's look at how we do that next. Close down the terminal and jump over into Google Chrome. All right, now for this step, we're on Etherscan on the CryptoPunk smart contract. We can analyze the contract over here and what read contract functions this smart contract has. And we see that the second function over here is punks offered for sale. So this is good information for us because punks offered for sale would have a red background. If we check this out, we know that punk 5550 has bids on it, but shouldn't be offered for sale. So this should give us a false. We query this. Look at this, is for sale is false. But we also checked that punk 1527. Let's just make sure. So we jump over to our React app, go to 1527. Get the Santa. Yep, this lady punk has the red background. So jumping back into the Etherscan, if we query for this, it is for sale. So running this contract function will tell us that we have to, for this punk, render a Santa hat with a red background. And if we go over and check the rest of the functions, if we scroll down a bit, there is function number 9 over here, which is punk bids. We can input a punk number. So for example, 550, which should have some bids on it. We query this and look at this. It says it has a bid. So we can run both of these functions. First, we'll run the punk offered for sale to check if it is for sale and give it a red background. But if it isn't, it still might have a bid on it. And if it does, we'll render a purple background for it. So let's go ahead and jump into our backend folder and run these two functions for the smart contract and the token we are querying for to add to our punk details the background color for the Santa hat. So jump back into Visual Studio Code. We can close our front end files over here, jump back into our backend folder, which is in index.js. And over here, we have our metadata. But after that, we are also going to want to search for the two functions. So after we've made our first request, we can create a background variable, let background color equal to the default blue. Now, after that, we'll run the Moralis run contract function to figure out if it is for sale. So const for sale response will be equal to, let's scroll down a little bit, and let me just paste in how we do this using Moralis. So we await Moralis EVM API, the utils method to run the contract function endpoint. What this takes as parameters is the smart contract, which is the same as the crypto's contract. Then the function name, which was punks offered for sale. We can check that over in Google Chrome, punks offered for sale. Then jumping back into Visual Studio Code, then we'll have to have the contract API. So this is something we'll have to import to the start of the project. We'll have to create a file over here called api.json, which comes with the project ready. And this over here, if we search for punks offered for sale, this is the application binary interface for this function call. So we know what the inputs are. So the first input is of name an empty string and a type uint256. So we have to pass in a token ID, and the outputs give us is for sale, the punk index, seller, min value, etc., etc. So this is just a way for Moralis to know which smart contract we want to call and what the inputs will be and what the outputs will be. So don't worry, this will be in the project directory, so you'll just have it, but just make sure to create that ABI file over in here. Const ABI will be equal to require./ABI.json, like so. Now we can close this. So now we have the ABI over in here. And then for the parameters, as you saw, it takes one parameter, which is an empty string, and we pass the query ID. So whatever token the front end user is interested in, we search for that token, whether it's for sale or not. Now, what we can do is write a conditional that if there was a JSON response is for sale, so if it was true, we change the background color to red, as now we know that the background color will be red. But otherwise, we do the exact same thing, but this time for the hasBids function. So it's the exact same flow. Let me just paste it all in here. Scroll down a little bit so we have a lot of real estate. Paste it in here. So we'll create a hasBids variable, which awaits for the Moralis EVM API to run contract functions. For the smart contract functions, it uses the punkbids function name. We have the same ABI, and we pass the token ID which we're interested in, and if it has a bid, we change the background color to purple. And then finally, for our response we're sending to our front end, what we do is we change this so that we append it with background color will be equal to the background color variable we've set within this endpoint here in our server. Save this. Now if we open this, everything should have been automatically updated using Nodemon, and our front end should have access to the background color that every token ID should have. We can test this out, open up Google Chrome, open up our React app, inspect, open up the console, like so. And as this was the first token ID, it should have a background color of blue. Look at that, we sent the background color of blue. Now let's test this with our few test cases. 550 was one of them, get Santa, and we get the background color of purple. As you see, the background color is purple. The same thing for the red one, which was 1527, get the Santa, and this has a background color of red. So that is how powerful Moralis is. It allows you to make calls to the smart contract, get the state of the NFTs, whether it's for sale, whether it's for bid, and that way we can actually render the correct hat. So now the final bit of the puzzle is in our front-end canvas component, use a different hat depending on what the background color is for that NFT. So closing down the terminal, jumping back into Visual Studio Code. Let's close down our backend folders like so. Jump into the front-end folder, source, canvas.js. And now, because we already have the punk details over in here, what we'll have to do, we can remove the male and lady punk PNGs, but we'll bring in all the other purple and red hats we have in our directory over here. Let's paste them in over here. Voila, like so. So now we have all these assets in our canvas component we can use conditionally based on what the punk details background color is. So let's save this. And now in here, if we have a female punk, we know that we have to still figure out which female hat to use. So what we're going to do is put all of this in a conditional. Let's delete it for now. And let me just paste in the code over here, format this nicely. So first we create a new image called lady hat, and we check punk details. If the background color is blue, then we set as the lady hat source the original lady hat. Otherwise, if it's purple, we'll use the lady hat perp. If the background color is red, we'll use the lady hat red. And then for the lady hat alt, we can always use lady hat. And just to make sure that everything works perfectly, let's make sure to lady hat on load, draw the image of the lady hat. Like so. And then we do the exact same thing for male hats over here. So we can remove these bits for generating just the standard hat and do the conditional for rendering the correct colored hat. Paste it in here, format it nicely. So now we create the male hat variable, which is a new image. If the background color is blue, we use the generic male hat. Otherwise, we use the purple male hat or the red male hat, and we give it an alt text of male hat. And then when we have loaded the image URL for the male hat, we can draw it onto our canvas, male hat, like so. And that is the finished product regarding getting the Santa hat. So let's close this canvas for now, jump back into Google Chrome, and look at this. We already have the correct red background over here. Let's try our other test cases. 550, get Santa, purple background. Then if we check out one of the original ones, 241, for example, now this gives us a blue background, and we can test this for any one of the CryptoPunks NFTs, and it should be working. You get the correct background based on whether the punk is for sale, it has any bids, or it doesn't have any of the above. So how cool is this? Everything is working splendidly, and you're getting your CryptoPunks with their hats, and they all look amazing. Now, one last thing, just as a little thing, there's always a little delay. So if you search for CryptoPunk 62, we have to wait for a while, and only then it changes. So what I think is nice is add a little rotating Santa hat to identify that the backend is making a call to the Moralis API to get us the hat. So there's no miscommunication on displaying the wrong token for the wrong token ID. So let's create that rotating Santa hat over here. Let's jump into Visual Studio Code, open up our app.js. For this, what we'll do is we'll create a new state variable. We'll call it fetching. So the fetching state will initially be false. And we also have in our file this transparent hat we can use. So let's just import it over in here, import the hat, and display this hat instead of our canvas when the fetching state is true. We just have to set a fetching state. So we can do that, for example, in this getPunk function. As we start our getPunk function, we can set the fetching state to true, like so. And just to exaggerate the effect, after we've already fetched it, we can even set a little timeout of 2 seconds, after which we'll set the fetching state to false. So we actually see the Santa hat rotating for a while because Moralis is so fast, the API calls will come to you in no time. So now let's just conditionally render the canvas over in here. So let's check for fetching. If we are fetching, what we'll do is we'll render something, and otherwise we'll render our canvas. So we'll move this canvas over in here, and then for our other functionality, we'll draw the image we just imported, which is the hat, source hat, alt equals hat, and the class name is hat. So this will just give you the styling we have in app.css. We can style this nicely by pressing Shift Option F. So everything looks nice. And now saving this, if we jump into Google Chrome, look at this. We have the Santa hat rotating. If we change this to, for example, 62.1, get Santa hat, we have the rotating Santa hat. And then we get our Santa hat with an eye patch. We can get any CryptoPunk with a Santa hat and a cool rotating Santa hat loading state like so. How sweet is that? We got the 3D glasses over in here. I hope you really enjoyed this video. You have a splendid Christmas. You've had a great year developing with Moralis, or if you're new with Moralis, you use Moralis features to build cool functionality like we did over here. Have a Merry Christmas, and I'll catch you in the next one.